And he's going to talk to us tonight. We got a lot to discuss. Certainly, these solar storms that are there, beware of the next 3 days due to the fact we're in trouble. Joining us right now, maybe who can help us out of it, is Mike from around the world. Mike?
Pastor Paul, God bless you, brother.
God bless you so much. Great to have you here tonight, Mike. And, well, Mike, you know what? Every week we get on here, we wonder just what's going to be going on next. There's a lot going on at the United Nations. There's Russia's threatening nuclear bombs. There's earthquakes in Mexico again. 7.6 today, 6.8. There's Hurricane Fiona headed toward Canada. There's another one that's forming that you said to beware of, one going into the Gulf. It just formed off the coast of Caracas, and they say it's going to go right into the Gulf of Mexico. So, Mike, is this the effects of Planet X? Why is the sun so volatile? Brock, let's put this up here before we turn Mike loose here. Look at this report. Beware of 3 days. Look at this. Beware. Beware. In 3 days, even ordinary solar storms on Earth will have a catastrophic event. Solar storms in the next few days could have a violent impact on Earth. Know all about the Russell-McPherson effect. What is that? Okay, the Earth has increasingly been dealing with an onslaught of solar storms since 2022 began. Some of the solar storms we have experienced were quite devastating. Remember, Elon Musk and his SpaceX faced the brunt of it when more than 40 of his Starlink satellites were destroyed in a solar storm event earlier in the year. We've also seen multiple radio blackouts, GPS disruption, and by now, things are going to turn even more frightening in the next 3 days because the Earth's main line of defense against solar storms, the magnetosphere, is going to grow weaker, letting even the weaker solar storms cause chaos on the Earth. Mike, this report just came out today. This is the scientists are saying. What's happening, Mike? What's going on here? Should we be concerned?
To really understand that, let's understand the magnetosphere, right? The sun. Well, let's talk about the magnetosphere. The magnetosphere extends out a pretty big distance. On the day side, it's about 9 to 11 Earth radii out. On the day side, the night side is hundreds of Earth radii going backwards, which means the sun is the moon is within the magnetosphere on the night side, right? Also, inside the magnetosphere, you also have space weather, right? So you have radiation, you have radiation belts, you have, of course, most of the moon's controlling orbital dynamics are there, and just all sorts of dynamics. So what we feel on the surface of the Earth comes from inside our magnetosphere. Now, if the sun was not there, the front side, or all sides of the magnetosphere, would go out to infinity, which means it would still be generated, but Earth would not sustain life, right? It just wouldn't do that because it wouldn't retain heat, it wouldn't retain oxygen development, nitrogen development. All those things wouldn't be here. The sun actually forces those most of these life-giving particles back in by putting pressure on the outside of the magnetosphere,
I didn't know that.
Right around the Earth. So without the sun, there's no life here.
So you're saying, remember, the sun is not just possibly posing a threat to the Earth with the solar storms, but it's the sun that's keeping our magnetosphere functioning to protect us. Is that what you're saying? Wow.
That's right. It pushes it back toward the Earth, causes us to be in like a bubble, right? A life-giving bubble. And all the radiation, all the space weather that we experience is important for the formation of the atmospheres. Without the sun, we would have no atmospheres, no retention of any life-giving gases or anything else. So the sun is constantly, winds are constantly coming off the sun at about 1 million miles an hour, right? 1.6 kilometers per hour on a continuous basis, slamming into our magnetosphere. Those charged particles are being redirected around the Earth right? And then a big portion of that is being sucked back into the Earth. When we have external objects, for example, or a secondary sun, or a body that people want to call Nibiru, Planet X, whatever they call it, it's going to affect our sun. As the sun is affected, so is our planet. For a long time, for a few years now, the Earth has been overcharging. And so the sun, its solar winds, have an average, they have an inclination as far as solar winds, which the Earth has been absorbing. All that energy is going into the Earth, much like overcharging a lithium battery, right?
Wow.
And that causes heat from the inside of the planet, heat and radiation, right? Gamma rays. The expulsion of this radiation goes through a process that's very slow, so we keep most of the energy. That's causing magma to be highly active within the Earth. So we see an escalation in volcanic activity, in earthquakes, and crustal movement. So all these processes are important, but as the sun is being affected externally, right, we're going to be affected all the way around. And when you have certain effects, like this balance is being kept right now, if the magnetosphere weakens, it cannot hold back those charged particles. It also means if it cannot hold back the charged particles, the dynamics inside of the magnetosphere, what we know as space, right, where the satellites and everything are, if it cannot hold back all those charged particles, it will disperse them into new parts of the Earth. Now that's a nightmare for this reason. If the Earth begins to absorb energy outside of the pole markers, we're going to have extraordinary events take place geologically. And we're talking about very damaging events, right? The Earth, there could potentially be land masses rising out of nowhere very quickly. That could actually happen because you got to think of it, most of the Earth is molten right up under our feet. And
Like
if that
islands?
begins to overcharge, right, it'll force all that up.
So,
now, in geological terms, or if we were to do this, if you were to see something like this in your front yard, it would be the equivalent of an earthworm pushing a little dirt up, right? And it would do that in about 30 seconds. Well, what if the Earth did that in about 30 seconds? That would be catastrophic, right? So you're looking at the same exact forces as that earthworm, but on a much larger scale. That's what would happen if the Earth overcharges that much. That will happen if our magnetosphere starts to go down a bit more than what it is. In fact, it has declined some. And as soon as it began to decline, what do we have? Earthquakes, big ones, right? Not tiny ones, big ones. And they're not, scientists can't even depict how dangerous they are or not, because some of the shallow and the deep ones are having the exact same effect across the crust of the Earth. That wave disbursement is causing real magma effects in places where it shouldn't be. And so if all this goes into a type hyper mode, we're going to be, we're going to be in for it. We're going to have a ride, maybe a ride we don't want, but it certainly seems to be forming right now.
it sounds like, Mike, that as this, and apparently this binary system that we've been referring to, Planet X, Planet number 9, whatever we want to say, that the effect of what it's doing to the sun is not just the sun. It's affecting every planet in our solar system, and it's causing a ripple effect, is what I'm hearing you say. And so it's not just the sun maybe scorching men, like it says in the book of Revelation, with heat, but we're seeing the worst storms we've ever seen. We've seen more rain. We've had more 1,000-year floods on the planet this year than ever in history. This Nova Scotia thing, we talk about a Category 3 hurricane going to hit Nova Scotia. Who ever heard it? Nobody's heard of anything like this. So there's some really dramatic events taking place. Is this all because of this activity going on there?
Yeah, external pressures are really altering our sun. The sun is changing, and sooner, when this thing gets close enough, Pastor Paul, it's going to take all the photons and redirect them into a different direction. They can see the trails it's leaving. The Earth, just like a comet, the Earth and the solar system itself leaves a trail. That trail is being diverted already, so it's not going in a straight line, right, that you would expect. It's being curved. It shouldn't be curved at all. Certainly not at the distance it's being curved. And so something enormous is out there. But it's extremely real. And, you know, it's just unfortunate that a lot of people, when they don't understand these dynamics, these events are going to come anyway, whether they understand them or not. But understanding would at least give a person a better chance at keeping their mind together during that time, because some people are going to go, their hearts are going to faint, are going to stop, you know, for fear. When you have that much fear, you don't know what's going on, you begin to discount your entire foundation of knowledge. When that takes place, a person is overwhelmed, anxiety will stop the heart. That's just inevitable. And so there you have the men's hearts failing them for fear. Not only that, you remember last week we talked, and in the Atlantic, there was one of the hurricane tracks, right, of this last hurricane that's going up into Canada. Something funny has happened. I don't know if anybody has picked up on this, but the track of that hurricane followed a low pressure system, right? Okay. In other words, there's a development of a low pressure system that will not move in the Atlantic Ocean due to water temps being they're being stagnated in that area. The only reason the East Coast was not destroyed was because a high pressure system came down from Canada out of the blue. It came down from Canada. In fact, they're about to change the European models and our models right before this hurricane started to divert its path because a high pressure system formed out of nowhere.
Did you say the only reason the East Coast wasn't destroyed?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are you talking about? I mean,
look at the hurricane. Look at the hurricane and the strength of the hurricane. Yeah, right. Normally, a hurricane does not build up strength that far out.
No, you're right. This is the biggest one to ever hit Canada.
And that far north.
I know.
Why is it building up strength? And so we have warm water anomalies taking place in the Atlantic and the Pacific, right? Yep. That's why the Gulf is so vulnerable right now. We have a real anomaly taking place in the Gulf, and if anything begins to form in that area based upon, you know, that heat anomaly in the ocean, that thing is going to grow into a monster.
Well, is the heat anomaly, Mike, because there's cracks in the seafloor of magma rising, heating the ocean?
Well, not really. Think of it this way: the magma has nowhere to go, right?
Okay.
When magma has nowhere to go, you're raising the pressure. It's like a pressure cooker, right? And the hotter, for example, a pressure cooker, that little thing at the top really goes off when you keep the stove on high. So what's happening right now is the magma is it's under so much pressure that the temperatures have actually gone up to where it's starting to melt the rock closer.
You still there, Mike?
Where there were never heat plumes. There are no more cold spots. It looks like on the Earth, no more cold spots on the Earth. This is a big problem in the North and South Poles. It's why the North Pole is heating up and certain gases that we've not had before are being released. It's why the South Pole is heating up. They're having to move large camps, and they just invested $800 billion, right, in trying to understand what can they do to mitigate what's about to happen in the South Pole, of course. But that's, you know, they poured trillions of dollars over years into investigation, trying to really come up with some sort of plan, right? They're trying to stop a comet. They can't even stop an iceberg or an ice sheet from falling off into the ocean, right? So, you know, we're in a spot that only some collaborative effort or the Lord's hand can stop, of course, but we've crossed a threshold.
Now,
we're in a brand new place in existence right now.
We are, and this is a question I have for you, because the United Nations are going on right now, and President Joe Biden and President Emmanuel Macron decided not to attend the big G7 global warming or Green New Deal conference. They said, put that on the back burner. We got bigger fish to fry. This is huge, because as you're explaining, the world, the effects that we're having on the planet is intensifying so bad. What could be bigger? What could be bigger than that that would draw them to the table? Is it the Russia threat? Is it Putin?
Nuclear annihilation.
What? Did you
Real,
just say
very real nuclear annihilation.
How real
that
is
could
it,
be-
Mike?
That's bad.
How real is this?
They've been having emergency talks for the last 4 or 5 days. China called Russia and tried to talk Russia down. China's calling for something very different now. They're changing their tune. That's how bad it is. So when China is starting to prep some of their forces in a very different way, right? In other words, they're prepping their forces because they've lost, it's almost like they totally lost interest in what they were doing before. So now they're prepping for something else. You know what they're prepping for? They're prepping for emergency maneuvers to have their people protected should some nuclear thing go off somewhere. That's what they're prepping for.
Wow.
In fact, every single nation has to prep for this. Putin may be, who knows where his mind is right now. And say, for example, Putin he said it because he was angry. It doesn't matter now. People have to prepare for this because Putin has everything he needs to actually do it.
Yeah.
And Europe is scared to death, right? Europe is something is happening in Europe. Europe's in bad shape, but Europe is scared to death. NATO countries are scared to death, right? The USA, I can say the USA, will see many countries be involved in things from a distance. And at that time, I can almost guarantee you that every believing Christian, everything they say, pray, and think is going to be very important during that time, more important than it ever has, because it's going to be very real circumstances. It's going to be very real. We'll see it from a distance. Hearts are going to be broken over here, but things are about to happen nobody ever thought was going to happen.
You know, Mike, this is serious. And you said the statement, who knows where Vladimir Putin's mind is right now. The fact that he called up 300,000 reservists and put a clause in there that he could actually draft 1 million people. Am I right? Do you have any intel that says
1.5 million? He can actually, when he's talking about drafting, right?
Yeah.
Now that term drafting is different than ours. The way we draft people is not like Israel. It's not like Russia drafts. Remember, they have to serve in some capacity, right, in those countries. So in fact, Russia could call up 25 to 35 million troops, just like that. And he can arm those troops. Right now, he has a standing military right now that has not engaged in any activity. I believe that count is at 3.7 million troops right now, right?
What?
Russia's not ran like other countries. Their soldiers do not wear uniform 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have certain battalions, certain brigades that operate just like civilian sectors, but they are 100% military. They're always military. So they do that because they never want anybody to know exactly where all of their military bases and everything else is. So Russia's very astute in keeping these things going. They analyze everything. They're always evaluating. And believe me, they can make, to date, they've made people believe things, basically whatever they wanted them to believe,
right.
Which is why some of the news coming out from this conflict, really, we can pray, but the information, what people are calling the facts, people are gonna find that a lot of it was propaganda. NATO hates Russia. They hate Russia, right? Russia has interrupted so many things from NATO, and I'm talking about we're talking about some dark powers, right? Not necessarily the NATO, somebody may be familiar with. We're talking about some dark powers. And if you just take notice, they have removed everything it takes to get people out of the way so they can go forward with certain agendas. There's no way in the world they can align themselves to go forward with certain agendas unless they have certain people removed. And they have effectively removed those individuals. These people plot and plan on a continuous basis. And it is, at its backbone, it's spiritual. Right, it's a spiritual thing they're doing.
Is there a chance that the Russian people, I'm hearing there's defecting, the people are fleeing, there's protesting starting. Is it possible that the people are going to say, this guy's lost his mind, we've got to get him out of here, we got to do something?
They had a story, right, that I saw the other day. but it wasn't by way of the news. I don't believe it's been printed yet. They had a story. It was about protesting. I saw the video. The video showed 45 people protesting. They inflated that story to say that 4,500 were protesting.
Wow.
You face things like that. That's propaganda.
Some propaganda.
That's why it's very
on.
difficult to see, because the average person does not have intelligence directly from Russia. Right. The average person does not have intel directly from Kiev or directly from the Ukraine.
So your reports,
so the
reports that you're seeing is some of this is being exaggerated, but there is something. Would you say there is something?
Well, there's some very distasteful things that have taken place that they'll never print, right? Because that would inflame the entire world on both sides. There's been some massive atrocities that they will not share. They just can't do that. And so they have to go forward very carefully. They can't ignite people to the point where the people will just disregard their own governments and take matters into their own hands. They can't do that, because then you would have thousands of people going to Russia, thousands going to Ukraine, right, to fight against each other. So they don't want to polarize individuals like that. So what they're doing is they have propagandized this whole situation, because they know that, okay, they found out something during President Trump's candidacy. They found out something about Facebook, right? They found out that all someone need do is start a rumor and have some individuals back that rumor. Remember the rumors against President Trump that began to gain momentum? This was what they did against President Trump after he started telling, certain little secrets and what they were doing.
Right.
They didn't like that too much, and so they started, there were certain rumors that began, and they grew.
Yes.
And once a rumor grows, it does not matter if it's true or not, because once you have a couple 10,000 people believing that story, you cannot tell them it was fake. You can't do that. So you can say fake all day, they're going to just blow you aside, and they're going to keep believing this whatever paradigm they believe in. And so when they found this out, they're using this same strategy with this war.
Yeah.
Right? They're using it. I mean, there are people employed sitting at home right now. They are good with analytics, and all they do is get the pulse of people and redirect their thinking the way they want them to think. Meanwhile, the death rate in Europe has increased by a significant percent. Why in the world are Europeans dying?
Yeah, why
the way they are right now?
dying?
Something is happening. I suspect the same thing is going to happen in the UK. I suspect a similar thing is going to start to happen in Australia after a bit of resistance. We have some very bad situations. And then, of course, the Israel issue, Pastor Paul.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I was getting ready to go there. I mean, okay, so
that's the big one.
Yeah, because Israel,
that is the big one.
Why in the world? Okay, so, I interviewed Rabbi Yehuda Glick today around noon. You guys can watch that. When I asked him this question, the pain and the grimacing on his face, he said, we were shocked when the news broke that Prime Minister Yair Lapid was going to give a speech offering the two-state solution to Palestine. He said, literally, we were shocked. And he said he even texted Yair Lapid saying, please don't do this. Let me ask you a question. Lapid, in his address, which I didn't get to see it, but I got to read the entire transcript, basically says he's willing to do a two-state solution for peace, but it has to include that Iran is reined in, that basically Iran has to be stifled. So he wanted to change the narrative to Iran. So Mike, is there something what's going on there? What's about to break loose here?
Well, in his mind, the most immediate issue is Iran.
Right.
Look at Russia. Russia's position is going to be shared by Iran. Right? Russia's not by themselves.
Right.
In fact, a lot of Putin's strategic cabinet right now is in Syria. The rest of them are in Iran. You have some in Moscow still, but they've been distributed all throughout the world. 2 of his command bases are co-op now, and they're not running from the places in the Middle East where we thought they were running, but they have been, all that's been redirected into Iranian territories that nobody can really disturb, right? So the only way that the West can actually rein Iran in is to make some sort of deal with them, to get them, to get some checks and balances with them. We cannot do that by force because we would provoke Russia, right?
Right.
Keep in mind, whatever Iran does, Russia is going to back. They're going to back it, period.
You're right.
And so Iran and Russia are they're like twin brothers, and no one's coming in between that. Even to date, despite the Ukraine, Russia has Iran. They just updated their aerial early defense system over Iranian airspace, right? So it's broadened a bit. Now they have a war. Putin is supposed to be stressed out, yet he's making moves in the Middle East. Nobody's reporting that, right? Nobody is. He's moving some big battleships down there in the Middle East also.
Russia's doing this?
Russia's doing this.
Yeah.
He's got submarines that are being parked in several different places of the world. So it's almost like in the public's eye, he's doing one thing, and he looks one way. But in a whole other dimension, this guy is making some massive moves around the world. And people they can't even see it. Most people, they can't discuss it because, of course, submarine positions and all this, you get into some very classified things, and he knows this. But, it caused us to go ahead and it was about at the beginning of this war, right before this war.
Is there some high level?
We reactivated our submarines. Several submarines were reactivated.
Really? Is there some
you don't
high level?
reactivate those.
Is there some big time high level meetings going on at the United Nations about this whole Russia thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's. So
you're saying
it's worse than what people thought it was.
You're saying we've brought out our nuclear submarines. We're stepping things up. We're on an all out readiness. I mean, we're at the brink of, as you said, nuclear annihilation. We really are, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to become, it's going to be the language coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if in some small scale, some accidents or some foreshadowings, like an accident were to happen.
Yeah.
And still, but they're also going to take full advantage because Israel is a problem to Russia. Israel's a problem to Iran. Israel's a problem to China. Israel is a problem to those nations. And I know they have a new Babylon in the Middle East, right? But it's a problem to them too. So
why is Israel such a problem? Why is Israel such a problem to these people?
Because of its foundations, because of faith-based things. It boils down to the Muslim faith is what it boils down to. And the promises given to Abraham's sons.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So they're going to believe it's not rightfully Israel's, period. That's part of their faith. You cannot fight faith with bullets and weapons and nuclear weapons. You can't fight faith that way. So they're going to believe this until they're totally removed, until that entire base of that religion is either proven absolutely wrong or they are removed from the face of the earth. They're not going to change. In fact, it's strengthening right now. They're not talking about anything regarding Muslims. Has anybody noticed that? There is no Muslim language.
No, it's not. Fact, that's nowhere in the dialogue. No.
It's almost like a gag order has been put in place, and no one will discuss. They don't want to say that word Muslim, and people are not thinking about that. Everything has altered just the way they want it to. In the meanwhile, right, there are infiltrations right now taking place from what? Radical Muslim-based countries. Right now, Pastor Paul, right now. I wouldn't be shocked if that spiritually disturbed quite a few people. They just didn't know what it was. But these folks are in position. There are people in the U.S. right now that should not be here. They just shouldn't be here. But they are. And they have no checks and balances.
Are you talking about some leaders in our own government?
Well, let's call them operatives.
Okay.
Right? Operatives. They shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be here.
So they're anti-American. They're anti-American. They're communists or some other type of enemy of America.
When people began to throw out the language of the Republic, they turned into something else, right? Yep. This America's been transformed, and so has the world, and it's becoming extremely dark. Well, guess what? In the Bible, doesn't it say because of man's iniquity, the earth is going to go through what it goes through with?
Yep.
Almost indirect, like a direct relationship to man's iniquity. So will the earth start just doing anything and everything as far as destructive weather, destructive geology?
We know that there's been a deep state. We know that there's been these secret societies that have been working for some time, whether it be also like the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. These are one-off government agencies that some of the bigger players, the global elitists, are involved in, that are trying to dictate the world. George Soros and some of these other big players are all, and the World Economic Forum now is another major place where, do you see this great reset that we're hearing constantly talked about now? Is this, the stock market's real unstable, inflation's out crazy, taxation? Is this a part of what's going on? Are they really trying to change the...
Oh, they are going, you know what, today, as this Israeli issue popped up, and the UN issue was, it's been a lot of planning behind that. It's a lot of still talks right now concerning that, but I believe it was, this Pastor, in the book of Joel, it speaks expressly about
parting the land?
The parting of the land. It speaks past tense about the land being parted. So the land was parted, right?
Yes,
the nation was somewhat scattered. But here's the thing, and then it says God will plead with them. Now, if you look at all the events in the world right now, it doesn't look too good. Plus, the title of your show, what's happening to our magnetosphere. Then you can't help but to look into one of the first questions is, how does God plead? And so, me being, I'm always nosy, Pastor Paul, you look into the Bible and you see how God pleads, and it lines up with some type perturber coming right here, messing up our atmosphere and the crust of the earth. For example, God pleads differently with his people than he does with the world. He says in Revelation and in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, Jeremiah 25:31 says, great noise is going to come from the ends of the earth, for the Lord has a controversy with the nations. He will plead with all flesh. He will give them that are wicked to the sword, saith the Lord. But then it describes how he pleads with them, with brimstone, with fire from heaven, with things like that. And so he also pleads by having, his fury is mixed in with his pleading. Now, when he pleads with his own people, he does so in a very different way. But when he pleads with those who have gathered themselves around Jerusalem, it is very, it's just right there. It's almost hard to mistake that one, because it's going to be utter destruction.
Right.
Utter destruction. And he did say that, these fires would be there. But Isaiah 34 really caught my attention, because it says, when he's talking about the pleading, he's saying, come near, O nations, hear and hearken, ye people at the earth, hear, and all that are there, and hear the world, and all things that have come forth of it. He says, the indignation of the Lord has come upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. Right. He has utterly destroyed them. So that means all the armies of the world are starting to poise themselves for some combative thing, right? We see that in the Middle East. We see that in Russia. We see that, we see it all around the world. It's almost like they can't help but to fulfill this prophecy. And they will gather as the Middle East ignites and cause more and more friction is caused, and these policies continue to pass. Some big things are about to take place here, big things. And this coincides with these heavenly problems that we have, these issues that we have. Well, Pastor, in that same verse, it says the host of heaven shall be dissolved. Yeah. And the heaven shall be rolled together as a scroll. That's in Isaiah 34.
Yes.
And Revelation 6, right? So when God starts pleading with all these people, that's destruction coming. As soon, because he pleads with them when they say peace and safety.
Yep.
As soon as they say peace and safety. And somebody asked me today, they said, well, I wonder why God would use that term, peace and safety. Well, that means peace and security, what they've been talking about for the last 5 years. But if the world has peace and safety, their type peace and safety, that's an abomination. That means everything they wanted, they have actually accomplished, or they have a path to accomplish it. He never said they would fully accomplish it. He said they would say it. He said they would make that declaration, and things would begin to happen. And here we are. People sit right at the precipice of some very life-altering events. Right now, some very life-altering events.
You mentioned,
there are a lot of people who know about this.
You mentioned Joel 3, where it says, in verse 1, it says, "For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land." Just like you said, it's happened before and it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And he's pleading for this. And notice, all nations. So here we are, we're setting up, the entire United Nations are sitting, the world is sitting there, and the discussion on the floor is parting the land of Israel, number one, global chaos of food shortages, number two, nuclear annihilation and wars, number three, and financial meltdown, number four. I mean, this is like the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This is what they're talking about at the United Nations, and they're not just talking it now. These are serious discussions of things that are happening. Are we in a different, has there been a paradigm shift? Are we moving to
Yes. No, it's already been one. We've crossed, the door has been open. We've stepped across the threshold. And it's one of the reasons they're coming out with the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 4 or 5 more photos next week from the James Webb telescope. I believe they're going to release some of those next week. I believe.
What are we going to see, Mike? What are we going to see?
These are very telling. Well, for one, of course, they messed up in science with most of their theories are not correct. Right? Now, they could embarrass the original individuals who poured their life into this because they want to honor them because they did other things. But they're about to overturn some things and create this story of creation is about to be taken over by somebody else. They will end up agreeing with creation, but it's going to be altered. So people might want to get themselves ready about that, because not only are people going to be challenged as far as what they think life is or life is about, but they're also going to be challenged by these scientific, I'm going to call them fake facts or contrived facts about what creation actually is. Because to hear scientists say, okay, things were created, this is divine and that's divine, but then they'll say, let me define divine for you, right? They're going to redefine some things, and that's going to throw, but that will get a lot of people hook, line, and sinker. I always have to keep in mind that in the end, Satan wants to corrupt us, to turn us against our Father in heaven. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to be in his shoes, to be rebellious, just like him, right? So then, ultimately, he's going to try and pervert the truth we have in us, which is Christ Jesus.
Amen.
Not because they believe in him, but they don't believe in the gospel. They don't believe in his name or upon his name. They don't believe in his causes. And this is what they are breaking people down of. And if people aren't careful these days, they will be broken down a bit, because even now, Pastor Paul, he's turned a lot of people inwardly towards their very own. People are locked in their own situation so much they can't look outside of themselves.
No.
They can't do it. And I'm sure that other people have noticed that people are, you have a lot of the world helping one another, but when it comes to the saints, you have certain people that always do it, but for the most part, people are they're so preoccupied internally that they're losing focus of everything outside of themselves. Well, if that ever stops, then what work is being done, right? At the most important time in history, what work will be done if everybody is turned inward? So it's part of this oppression.
They got people so beat down and so oppressed they don't. They can't they can't hardly lift their head up in time to see what's really going on. They're slaves to the system.
There you go. They say they're worn out and everything else, but I say this though, a long time ago I took what I wanted, threw it out, because I found out I can only get tired if my way does not pan out, right? I can't get tired if I'm constantly looking for what the Lord wants, right? It's kind of like loving a person. I don't love a person the way I think they need to be loved. I'm going to love a person for who's in front of me, right? I'm never going to throw on them what I think they need or how they need to be loved, but let them be free in that.
Right.
And let them grow. But see, because Satan can't interrupt that. He can always interrupt everything else and pervert everything else. But at any rate, Pastor Paul, these guys are doing things right now. Right now it's in line with prophecy in a very big way. This Israeli move, this conversation about Israel is going to be a very disturbing thing because it will be militarily backed. You're talking, a two-state solution is not going to go over well, right?
No.
First of all, it's not. So we already know that's going to take military backing to enforce it. Suppose they said, okay, we're going to have a two-state solution, right? They're not going to agree with that. You're going to have factions of people that will physically fight, because they're not going to go for this. That means militaries are going to have to rise. They're going to have to be certain divisions assigned to the Middle East yet again to
some
oversee
kind of peacekeeping
the transition of things. So this is a brand new can of worms by way of the conversation, and they are testing the waters.
Open that? Now my question is, why would a man open this can of worms? Well, is he being severely pressured that, hey, we're going to do this to you, you can either come along with us and make it easier, or we're going to do it to you anyway? So is that part of what's going on here with the Lapid, or is he in on the hostile takedown of Israel?
Pastor Paul, there are going to be some folks. People are going to actually learn who people are, and I'm telling you, it's going to be very distasteful.
Yeah.
It's going to be distasteful. There are a lot of people we thought you may think are good externally, but as the Lord said, those things that are talked about in secret are going to be told openly. The time is coming where people will not have to hide these iniquitous thoughts, because the world has aligned itself with iniquity in a big way, even by policy. Now that and it's funny how we have this new king, right?
Yeah.
We have everything else is starting to realign very quickly, and then we have this issue with the weather that's just started. I can almost guarantee it's going to be, if everybody remembers this year, they can remember the storm points. It's going to be at least two times worse next year. We're going to have, that water event is coming, is inching closer and closer and closer. This winter is going to tell. The moisture, the ability for the earth to contain water and drop it on the lands is off the scales. That means where you would have 4 inches of snow, you're going to have 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow.
What?
Right? You're also going to have drastic temperature swings.
Yeah.
Okay. Temperature swings as far as, imagine maybe you have a couple feet of snow, and then in one day, right, from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., it all melts. That's flooding, right, which refreezes at night.
Oh.
And then it snows again, and the water does not get to melt all the way, right? And so you have this a few times. You're going to start destroying life.
Yeah.
You're talking about crop losses in a big way, because once it permeates the soil, when it's cold, it does not evaporate like it normally does. If this compounds itself like it's been doing in high regions of the U.S., we're going to start losing trees and soil and everything else. It will actually alter the soil. Well, this mixed with greater and greater radiation externally, which is what we're experiencing.
So is our food supply, doesn't that affect our food supply? I mean, ability to...
Have you noticed, let me ask a question here. Here, you ready? Okay. Has anybody noticed the different taste in crackers? It's not your taste buds. That's not what it is.
What is it?
In plain crackers, right? If you eat some plain crackers, they taste differently. Some people, maybe they've caught on to this.
What do they do different to
because
the crackers?
they're not using normal wheat.
Okay, here we go.
Listen, they're trying to prop up the fact that they're trying to act like we still have wheat, right? They're trying to act like we still have certain things. Certain things are gone. They're gone. They're just gone. They're gone.
They're not
and once the
coming back.
warehouses are empty, there's no more. The radiation in the earth is very different. Gamma rays, all right? The emissions are increasing coming out of the earth, not externally from the heavens, but out of the earth itself. Right? I utter this from time to time. Everything is changing. So expect the formulas. I can't eat crackers right now for some reason. It's almost like I can taste, before I know these things, I can taste it, and I just can't accept it for some reason. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Because it is not,
But
because the wheat has been, is it because you think GMO?
since the Ukrainian war, that's a good question. Since the Ukrainian war, they
Yeah.
passed a bill. They passed a bill to use GMO wheat.
I knew it. And
That
that's
bill
going
couldn't
to
be
affect
passed until the Ukrainian war. It
That-
could not be passed until the Ukrainian war.
Okay, now when you use GMO, it takes away all the nutrition, all the vitamins, everything, and it does, your body does, it rejects it. It doesn't like this stuff. Am I right?
Yeah, and by the way, that's a base ingredient. It's a base ingredient. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the file on GMO wheat should be distributed on the internet, should be trackable. The history should be put out there. Like, it's a very good thing because it's pesticide resistant, radiation resistant. All this GMO food, all this GMO everything, Pascal. Why is it important that it be resistant to radiation? Why?
Because radiation's coming. That's what you're saying. The storm, is that right? Or nuclear bombs, or what?
There you go. All this corn, the GMO corn crops and everything else. One of the biggest things was not that it was resistant to pesticides, but radiation, because the sun's radiation is not the same anymore.
Right.
And people have real, but if we ingest that, guess what happens? Over time, your skin becomes very different concerning radiation, right? Things are altering. I thank God that Jesus, he died for our souls, right? Our flesh is kaput, basically. He died for our souls, but this stuff is just not going to bode very well for a lot of people. They're doing everything they can to prop up this view of normalcy. That's what they're doing. They're doing everything they can to make it seem like there's no problem in space. Everybody's parading the James Webb telescope, taking pictures, 50 light years away, and they're not looking at what's at our back door. They're not looking at that. The stuff that's coming into our atmosphere, the penetration we've been having, how it's been escalating, right? They're not covering the land masses raising in the Atlantic and the Pacific, right? They're not going to tell anybody that 500 feet of land has distributed itself in less than a month in the Atlantic.
No!
Don't say anything about that.
No.
Yeah, so we have some real issues happening here. And if the coast plate happens to go, if that cork leaves off that fault line down in Colombia and Ecuador, which is very concerning, and in Mexico, that's a telltale giveaway.
Let's talk about that.
We're going to have a change in quite a few more things.
Let me ask you a question, because we had a 7.0 earthquake in Mexico. We had a 7.6 in Mexico. We had a 6.8 today. And if I'm not mistaken, that fault line in Mexico goes all the way up to San Diego, right along the west coast. Is this what you've been talking? Are you worried about this? Is this what you've been saying?
Big time.
This could knock San Diego, California into the ocean.
Big time. Although it's common, right? It's common because you're looking at subduction zones and you're looking at quite a few strips that go down in that direction. So they have been known to do this in intervals, but every time they do it, that coast plate is loosened, right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's normal. It happens, every so often. Every time the land shakes, that coast plate is cracking to pieces.
Wow.
It's going to give way. It will most certainly give way, right? Haiti is tied very intimately to Chile. And so expect some changes in that area, which is also tied to Russia. So expect Russia to start having earthquakes, right? And in the next day or so, I believe, if we get a radiation buildup, the telltale sign is going to be more earthquakes, possibly an eruption. I'm looking for both at this point. And because there are certain land masses, I said this a long time ago, people should have gotten away from entire places. They should tell people to get off these, out of these places. For example, I'm going to say this is going to sound wild, but think of Japan, right?
Okay, yep.
Japan, in my opinion, is unsafe, but it takes years to get people out of a place like that.
Well, yeah.
Years. You cannot tell a person an earthquake is going to hit, in the year 2040 because you can't really predict those things like that. But if you knew for a fact that the land was giving way and that it's going to slide and that all that volcano is, the magma is going to be released in that area likewise, right? How could you get someone to get out of Japan? You couldn't tell them a thing. And it would take years for somebody to go and prove anything, right? Nobody does anything until you prove it. So at this point, there are several situations like that. The only way to really know that is if the Lord himself were to give a person revelation, I mean, deep down inside of them, trouble them and say, and they just wake up and say, we got to get out of here. I believe the Lord will do that more and more these days. Because there are places
those that
are
have
not
an ear,
safe.
those that have an ear to hear what the Spirit says.
Right.
You have to, but you got to be walking close to God, and you got to be communicating with God. And
it's very real too, Pastor Paul. It's real. The Lord has never, he has never misguided me anywhere where I was going. And a lot of people say, well, how can you tell us the Lord versus yourself? Well, it's very easy for me, because when the Lord gives you something, you don't have a full comprehension of it. Everything in you will say, you've got to do it. You've got to do this. It's almost like making a turn on the highway, right? Everything in you will say, turn. You don't know where it came from. And you start turning. Someone will say, why are you turning? I don't know. I just have to, right? Yeah. Because it's almost like the Lord, when he speaks, if you belong to him, it's almost like nothing in you wants to disobey.
There's no question when God speaks to you, you don't have to ask, is this God? You know. If you're asking if this is God, then it's probably not God. When God speaks to you, you really do know. I mean, that's what you're saying. You absolutely know. And we've all, at some point in time in your life, have had that call from God, or that nudge, or that warning. And so the world is, what you're saying is the world is on warning right now. We're on red alert, right? We're on red alert as a humanity. Would you say?
Time is much closer than anybody thinks.
Folks, when I think about these things, Mike, I don't think people are ready. I don't think people want to know. I think that they're hoping it goes away. And they just wish they didn't have to deal with this. And that's not the right approach, I think. Mike, we have to warn the people to flee from the wrath to come?
Yeah. Absolutely, Pastor Paul. We do. And you know what? It's always a person who is safe, right? Because they don't want to be the individual, right? We've all seen it. A person is safe looking at other people who are unfortunate, right? You're always going to have somebody who sees the calamity of another. But people have to ask themselves a question, right? Because if they have that authentic walk, Jesus, his promises are never going to be broken. They haven't been broken. They never have. People who think, well, the Bible, this faith thing didn't work out for me. No, it's because you were not in position. We're not exactly authentic all the time with the Word of God. But right now, this time, people are going to get a big demonstration of what I mean. The world's not going to give you warning. They're not going to give you a warning. They're going to give you the wrong info. And the info you need to have, you will have obtained it spiritually if you would have acted on it. And that takes faith. That takes faith. And it takes a person being in that rightful position to have that. It really has to be an authentic relationship, right? A very authentic relationship, because this time it counts. But the Lord is gracious. He's going to give us a wake-up call, all of us, right? Because he knows we don't move without an alarm, and some of us won't wake up unless we are nudged. So he's going to give us a nudge, and I can almost guarantee it's going to work for all those who believe.
One last question here, Mike. Okay, so Israel's putting Iran, the seriousness of Iran on the table. Russia is threatening the world with nukes. Israel's really heavily deciding that they may have to part the land, peace and safety, and then come sudden destruction. We have a shortage of food. Our food is tainted. We have radiation levels are spiking. The sun is blowing up and exploding. The storms are getting worse on the planet. And men's hearts are on evil continually. Wickedness. And there's undermining of good people, and good nations are being torn down from the inside out. What is the most critical of all these things? If I had to say, Mike, what's the most critical of it all, what would you say?
Well, you know what, Pastor Paul, before these things really escalated, brother was against brother.
Yeah.
People were against each other, right?
Yeah.
One of the most critical things that's happening right now under the noses of a lot of people. The dissension is so deep.
Oh.
Violence
Oh.
Violence is it's already been planned. There's too much chatter about it. People are ready to make moves because they think it's a lost cause. And the next thing that happens in the world is just going to bolster them to go ahead and put their plans in action, right? So we're looking at a very volatile time.
So we're in a time bomb.
In many different aspects.
This is like a time bomb. Anything could trigger to blow the thing wide open.
That's right. That's right. Anything can. It can. If it sends a person over the edge, people have become desperate. I mean, desperate in their believing. You know, even, you know, lately, I've been praying. I said, Lord, make me careful of what I say, because people are. Yeah. It's almost like they will listen to something and really soak it up, believing it and act on it. Right? Persecution of the church begins this way when people act, and this is something that I know for a fact is coming. They're going to have folks out there to do some very terrible things, and they're going to say, well, I was motivated by so-and-so.
Oh,
they're going to point people out, point them out. They're going to start shutting people down that way and say so-and-so did it. If people are going to find out I don't believe people know what evil is, but they're about to find out exactly what evil is. Evil gets very comfy with people and turns on you.
They're going to blame people for other people's bad behavior.
They're going to blame churches. They're going to blame religious institutions. Yep, they're going to blame influential people.
Yeah, like myself or others. Would you say?
But the Lord, yeah, they're going to do it. I know that for a fact.
Because they're going to say we're preaching hate speech, or that we're preaching, we're inciting an uprising, or what? I mean.
Oh, they're going to get past that. They're going to say that the way faith is being taught, right, is directly influencing a person to act. Right?
Oh,
but see, I'll tell you something, though. Jesus said that. That's why, Pastor, I'm so thankful for you and your ministry, because Jesus said that by way of his Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit would give us words to say that no one would be able to gainsay against.
Amen.
So in other words, they'd just be dumbfounded. Yeah. Right? And I know for a fact, Pastor Paul, you have, I'll give you one case. I know I'm taking up time, but we were writing something some years ago. We were writing up an SOP some years ago. Do you not know, before we got that page completed, you spoke something out of the SOP and everybody turned around. Everybody. This was before I ever called into your show.
What is an SOP?
You caught the attention of quite a few people. Standard operating procedure.
You're saying I called it out? I called this out?
You called it out. You called it out, and we were just typing it. It was on a computer. We were typing and editing the SOP to make sure it aligned with regulations and policy, right? And you named one of the lines of the SOP just like that, and you just kept going. Everybody turned around. So see, in that moment, it kind of, that dream I had, I know that dream is confirmed, because from that time, Pastor Paul, there have been so many things that have happened. I can write a book right now of the things that have happened.
I want to say something to you.
Possibly you have long forgotten, but I have.
Well, you know something? I went back into the archives, went way back in the archives of 2014, and I found, and I'm not going to tell anybody what I found, but I found information that God had showed you, and it's actually way back in 2014, and now I see how that's about to happen. And he even showed you who the person was. And I'm not talking about the coffin either, but he showed you who the person was. And you mentioned part of this the other night about the armored vehicles and the uniforms. And I started wondering, I said to myself, God, you keep having this man bring this forward and forward and forward and forward. Something's about to happen that's outside the norm. In other words, outside the norm of how our nation is run and how the nations are run. Is that what you see, Mike, coming?
Yeah.
The stone steps.
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
Well, I didn't mean to call out a SOP and get everybody upset wherever that's at, but
well, you didn't upset them.
It probably amazed them.
I think that woke some people up big time.
Yeah. The Holy Spirit.
That's impossible. That's impossible, right?
But
that's
the Holy
just
Spirit.
Impossible.
But don't you agree?
That's
You
right.
agree with me that the Holy Spirit can He will give us supernatural knowledge.
Absolutely.
We don't even know what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mike, this has
You'll
been
do that
awesome.
to a willing vessel.
It's been
Well,
awesome.
Pastor Paul, it's always an honor. It's always an honor.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your service for not only this country, but for the Lord, mostly. All right? Both of them. But
Well,
thank you.
Pastor Paul, God bless you. You're the hub.
That's
You're a
what you
power
say.
hub for
This
Christians.
is the power
That's
hub.
where you are. That's
Yeah,
right.
we're changing the SOP out there. Okay, so let's keep
That's right.
going.
That's right. God bless you and all you're doing,
All
Pastor.
right. God bless you, brother. We'll see you next week, Lord
right.
willing. Amen.
All right.
Mike from around the world, folks. Standard up.